everyone, my name is Rebecca Fogel, and my senior project is titled Development of Underdevelopment, Foreign Aid, Debt Dependence, and the Value of Community in Ghana. So for the past several years at UW, I've become more and more interested in the community development and poverty alleviation process. So I've learned a lot about it theoretically, but it wasn't until I went to South Africa in 2018 and to Ghana during my most recent internship that I really learned more about it on a more human scale. This project has sort of been brewing in my head for probably 4 years now, but I just hadn't really ever thought about it in such a real-world context. So during my freshman year, I took Global Health 101, and that really just sparked something. We focused pretty heavily on the social determinants of health, legacies of colonialism, neoliberalism, and foreign aid and development in the Global South. So before that class, I hadn't ever really thought about any of those issues that critically, but since then, it's just really stuck with me. So this project has sort of been in the making for the past 4 years, just in terms of my thinking around these issues. My main research question asks whether small-scale, community-driven development initiatives are a more sustainable and effective alternative to official development assistance in the Global South. So this project is largely split up into 3 different sections: research, engagement, and reflection, but they all sort of flow together. I spent about probably 3 to 4 months on research, and then engagement was my actual internship in Ghana, so that was 2.5 to 3 months, and then reflection kind of happened throughout the whole process, but most heavily in the last 3 months of this project. Before I even left for Ghana, I had to learn a lot about foreign aid in general and the history of economic policy and development in Ghana. I'd learned a lot about foreign aid and development in previous classes at UW, especially in global health and during study abroad, but I knew absolutely nothing about Ghana's history of development and economic policy. So I spent about 4 months before I even left for my internship just researching the historical and political social background of Ghana, so I would be able to connect my experiences and reflections back to something grounded in real history and knowledge. Foreign aid in the Global South, and to Africa in particular, really began in earnest right around the end of World War II.
At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, delegates from 44 allied and associate countries arrived for the opening of the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference. These meetings are designed to promote trade in the post-war world and to create a foundation for lasting peace.
Over 700 delegates from around the world gathered to create a global financial management system to facilitate international trade and cross-border investment, and the International Monetary Fund was established to oversee that. Many African countries were also gaining independence in the late 1950s and 60s, and they often relied on aid from foreign powers like the US, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Ghana in particular gained independence from Britain in March 1957, and then received huge amounts of aid to fund large public spending investments. In the 1970s and 80s, countries across the African continent had achieved unsustainable debt burdens due to large influxes of foreign aid over the previous decade. And at this point, the IMF and the World Bank began to offer debt relief in the form of structural adjustment programs, but with certain conditionalities. So in order to qualify for debt cancellation, recipient countries had to accept new neoliberal economic policies, meaning privatizing markets, deregulating trade, and loosening government control. And many countries, including Ghana, did accept these policies, which unsurprisingly resulted in an even larger debt burden as countries had to keep borrowing more and more to pay back their previous debts. Dambisa Moyo is a Zambian economist, and she makes a really strong argument against official development assistance in her book, Dead Aid. By the end of the 1980s, total debt in the Global South was at least $1 trillion. The cost became so substantial that it eventually dwarfed foreign aid going into poor countries, leading to a net reverse flow from poor countries to rich to the tune of $15 billion every year between 1987 and 1989. Moyo also makes one of the strongest cases against the current attitudes around foreign aid, claiming that between 1970 and 1998, when aid flows to Africa were at their peak, the poverty rate in Africa actually rose from 11% to a staggering 66%. The year 2005 was a really pivotal moment in the foreign aid landscape. At the G8 summit at the Gleneagles Hotel in Scotland, world leaders proclaimed a renewed sense of urgency for international development assistance, and the Commission for Africa, chaired by British Prime Minister Tony Blair, called for an immediate $25 billion increase in aid to sub-Saharan Africa, with an additional $25 billion to come by 2015.
We have come here to announce a plan of action in partnership with Africa. It isn't the end of poverty in Africa, but it is the hope that it can be ended. It isn't all everyone wanted, but it is progress, real and achievable progress.
In 2013, Blair proclaimed that foreign aid had doubled and debt throughout the Global South had dropped. Despite these supposed successes, international donors have made far less progress in improving aid effectiveness than hoped for. Aid has not been aligned to recipient countries' national priorities, in-country systems for procurement and delivery have been underutilized, and donors have been unable to ensure transparency and accountability. William Easterly, a prominent American economist focused on international economic development, says that the feedback loop is broken. The rich people who give the money or vote for foreign aid are not the ones receiving aid services, and the poor have no way of registering their satisfaction or dissatisfaction. This is the cautionary tale of global sustainable development. People do have good intentions, but way too often end up ignoring the local context or fail to recognize what people actually want. Many projects are often not sustainable over the long term either. Installing a water pump in a water-scarce area is great, but what happens when it breaks and no one knows how to fix it? So I arrived in Ghana in early January and spent about 2.5 months there with an organization called Global Mamas in Cape Coast. Global Mamas is an NGO that promotes economic self-sufficiency and empowerment for women across Ghana through fair trade clothing and accessory production. Boutiquers, seamstresses, weavers, bead makers, and quality controllers are all part of Global Mama's vast network in Ghana, and their handmade products are sold in hundreds of stores all over the world. My main job with Global Mamas was to conduct impact assessment interviews of all the employees and producers for the 2019 annual report. My supervisor, Patience, had created a survey with questions on things like housing, health, ability to cover living costs, overall satisfaction, and accomplishments and future goals. I used this survey and traveled around Cape Coast, as well as to Global Mama's other main locations, Accra, Akuse, and Krobo, to interview close to 85 women in their homes and workshops. Doing this work is so important for a community-led NGO to measure and track their progress, and it was also such an incredible experience for me to see firsthand the impact Global Mamas has on people's lives.
My name is Deborah Asma, and I'm a seamstress in Global Mamas. I've been working there for 9 years. Training people because I want them to be like me in future. If you are a lady and you don't work, it's very hard. So if you have work doing, you don't have problem. You have your independence. You can buy what you want to buy. Everything that you want to do, you can do with your mind, your own money.
My name is Gladys Tetekin Adime, and I've been working with Global Amounts for about 10 years now. In the beginning, I was an assembler and then promoted as the quality controller, and then after that, I was promoted as the general manager. I work with, for now, 27 women and then 30 bead makers. I want them to be like me because managing them is like you are training them to be somebody in future. I'm a creative person, so that is why I'm able to reach this stage. And as I'm growing too in Global Amounts, I'm learning new things. Working for Global Amounts have impacted my life because I'm able to take care of my family. I'm able to take care of my whoever needs help, like friends, and raise up this shop, which is one of my goals because I have a big family, which I've been taking care of. Being with the ladies makes me happy because they are always funny. And working with the bead makers too makes me happy because we all learn new things. Creating, when it's time for sampling, creativities also makes me happy because that is where I started. That brings me to Global Mama, so I still love creativity. If you are able to say to yourself, I'll make it, you can make it. If you make yourself a lower person, normally in the past, that is what I've been saying to myself, but it reaches a point which I have to make myself strong, that I'm also somebody, so I have to make it, and then I'll make it, and that is where I am now.
When I got back to the US, I synthesized all the data I'd collected to create a case study report on Global Mamas as a more sustainable and effective alternative to official development assistance in the Global South. For the final section of my project, I spent a considerable amount of time reflecting on my experience overall, on the foreign aid landscape in the Global South in general, and on the specifics of an organization like Global Mamas. I really challenged myself to think critically about what this kind of work means in the bigger picture, and to try to break down some of the narratives around poverty and development in the Global South. My final product is a report that I'm writing and designing, including background on foreign aid and why it's not working, the history of economic policy and development in Ghana, examples of alternatives to official development assistance, including my case study on Global Mamas, recommendations to increase aid efficacy and accountability, and my reflections on the entire experience. So I have 3 main recommendations for how I think the Global North should be involved in development in the Global South. USAID microfinance programs and other similar initiatives are investing in small and medium enterprises instead of just pumping money into the hands of government officials. Community-driven development organizations like Global Mamas put people first and focus on their needs first and foremost, but they often need the support of larger donors, especially amidst sometimes convoluted development and aid policy in the Global South. Donors and organizations from the Global North can provide equipment and training to enhance the capacity of local experts, working with systems and institutions already in place. Foreign organizations working in the Global South should aspire to work themselves out of a job by training and supporting local leaders and workers to ensure long-term sustainability. By consulting with local leaders and community members about their needs first, donors and organizations from the Global North can help institute thorough monitoring and evaluation systems to ensure that programs are aligned with country priorities and accountable to the local community. Ensuring transparent supply chains and information flows are crucial if programs are to be fully integrated within existing local systems and initiatives. Working on this project has been such an enjoyable and engaging process, and I've really just learned so much about myself and what I want to do, as well as community development in African cities, and it's made me even more excited for the kind of work I could do in the future.